from Kansas State University. This is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And coming up today, the Dean of Agriculture at K-State, Ernie Minton, is joined by Simon Tripp of Teconomy Partners, as they'll discuss the economic impact of agricultural research at K-State on the Kansas and regional agricultural sectors. This based on a recent extensive analysis of the returns to public dollars invested in the university's research initiatives. Then the first of this week's series of visits with county and district extension agricultural agents who are in Manhattan for the K-State Research and Extension Annual Conference. Today we'll welcome in West Plains Extension District Agent Renee Tuttle. And K-State's Gus van Der Hoeven is standing by with this week's Stop, Look, and Listen. All that here on Agriculture Today. You are tuned in to Agriculture Today. Welcome once more. On this segment, we want to touch upon what is still what could be considered a crossroads for agricultural research out of land-grant universities, including Kansas State University, when considering the funding availability and facilities availability for continuing that vital research. We're talking with two individuals here who have been really on top of this question, and one has been assisting the College of Agriculture at Kansas State in defining the value of that agricultural research. He is Simon Tripp, Principal and Senior Director with Teconomy Partners, and as well, Ernie Minton joining us. Ernie is the Dean of the College of Agriculture here at Kansas State University. And we'd like to begin with you, Ernie, if we might. The College of Agriculture has enlisted the assistance of Teconomy to capture the economic impact of K-State's agricultural research. And you might further explain that process.
Yes, Eric. There's a rather substantial body of evidence from our colleagues in agricultural economics that really documents quite convincingly that public dollars invested in food, ag, natural resources, research and development is really leveraged quite heavily into economic impact. You know, we were interested in communicating pretty clearly to our stakeholders what really is the value of appropriated dollars to Kansas and the region. And that's when we turned to Teconomy Partners for help in really nailing this down for the College of Agriculture at Kansas State University and also more broadly for K-State Research and Extension.
And it's worth saying here, this is something of a daunting task, Ernie, because it's a multi-layered question, the value of that research.
That's exactly right. You know, the way I think about it, it has to come down to very simple examples and approaches. But it's understandable that if we invest, $100,000, for example, in total in, let's say, wheat breeding research, and our wheat breeder might make a cross in the greenhouse this year, I think all of us understand because of the growth of plants, the production of seeds, and those kinds of things, the value of that investment doesn't show up next year. It may not show up in 2 or 3 years. But as that variety gets developed and it gets into farmer fields, it begins to create the opportunity for profits that result from that original investment. Its payout then begins to multiply across many, many years from that original investment. So it is complex and can be technical, and quantifying it from an economic perspective can be technical as well.
Well, Simon, your firm was tasked with breaking all of that down and coming up with tangible reads on the value of agricultural research out of Kansas State University. In layman's terms, can you spell out just how you approached this massive undertaking?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, our firm specializes in looking at science and technology and its impacts on the economy and specific industries and their impacts on the economy. Where it gets real complicated, and you sort of touched on this, is that agriculture writ large is an exceptionally complicated arena, whether you're talking about animal agriculture or crop agriculture or agricultural processing, food safety, all the different things that agriculture touches on. And each of these areas are things that the university works on. And in most cases, the university is doing multiple projects in each of those areas. And pretty soon you see you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of individual projects, all of which may be having an impact. And so you really can't do an in-depth analysis of each and every project. That would be a sort of a lifetime's undertaking. So what we do is we use input-output analysis to quantify the expenditure-based impacts of the College of Agriculture and its operating units. And then we use examples or case studies on what we call these sort of functional impacts of what the actual research or extension activities or education activities do. And in some regards, that's a storytelling exercise, but what's interesting is typically what we'll find with any College of Agriculture is just one or two examples of research have such incredibly high impact that you very quickly, as Ernie said, get into multiples of the money that government puts in coming back out because of the research that takes place. And that's what we found in the case of Kansas State, really strong functional impacts from research.
That was manifested in 4 examples in particular, cited out of this, what ended up being a rather massive document here with lots of data.
Yep.
And would ask, Simon, you to speak to those examples and then Ernie follow up, if you would.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've had something like 100 and something different case studies within the report that we touch on. But when we dove into just sort of looking at some really big impact areas coming out of agricultural research, what we found was the Kansas wheat production that's using Kansas State-developed wheat varieties and blends. That has around $330 million 2019 economic impact. So all of this was FY 2019. Mm-hmm. The economic output impacts from the Drop XL water-optimized sorghum that Kansas State developed was $60 million in the case of the year. But these are big numbers. The K-State prescribed fire practices for improving grazing and weed control had an estimated impact of $77 million. And the K-State early stocker recommendations for the beef cattle industry have a strong impact, around $20 to $23 million a year. So when you add just those 4 examples up of wheat, of sorghum, of prescribed fire, and of the stocker recommendations, those alone had a $500 million annual economic impact. So you see it adds up really quickly. And as I said, that's examples in 4 areas. We looked at hundreds within the study.
Ernie, when you boil it down then to the return on investment, the returns back from each research dollar spent for agricultural research at the university, that ratio is a big number too, isn't it?
Well, it is. And the work of Simon's group, in our case, 17 to 1. It's quite obvious. That is a payoff you'd take every day. Continuing to invest in the work that we do as a land-grant university is really very, very important, and it's of economic importance to the state, and I'll say state and region.
And Simon, as somebody in an outside capacity here, you would concur a lot with what Ernie has to say based on the analysis that you conducted then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've done this analysis for the USDA overall. We've done analysis for a number of different land-grant institutions. And when we look at the agricultural space, it's such a fascinating and important industry sector for universities to be working with. It's also an incredibly vibrant tech space. I mean, we work in all areas of science and technology, but we often use agriculture as this example now of where digital technologies and mechanical technologies and biological technologies are all converging and creating tremendous tech sector opportunities. So it's not just about improving agriculture in Kansas, it's also about building up new industries in the science and technology of agriculture that presents great economic opportunities for the state moving forward. And of course, it's an industry that's nationwide. When you invest in agriculture, when you invest in agricultural research, that benefits every county in the United States. The food processing industry is often in urban areas. It's not just a rural industry. And, I don't think people tend to understand the critical importance of agricultural research, the competition that we're in with other places around the globe for growing new industries out of agriculture, and the critically important issues that it addresses. It's a seriously underinvested area. And when we look at the land-grant universities, and this is a rather unique sector in that there's only a selected group of universities that work in agriculture. You won't find much ag research happening at Harvard or at MIT or at Stanford. It happens in our land-grant universities, and yet most of those institutions have not had any new buildings or infrastructure built since the 1950s. And it's a case that the United States is underinvested in the agricultural research, infrastructure, and enterprise.
You know, the national conversation about national investment in infrastructure in other areas, in ports and airports and bridges and roads and so on and so forth. The other message we've been trying to elevate is that this is a national problem with aging infrastructure and deferred maintenance at our land-grant colleges and universities across the U.S. And so, we're hopeful, of course, that there's lots of debate around this, but if there's an opportunity to include this need in whatever infrastructure plan ultimately comes to us, that it will be a great investment and certainly a needed investment going forward to ensure, our food system, the research that's required to move it forward and advance it, the innovation that needs to take place. We have the facilities to do that.
Well, thanks to the both of you for lending some important data from this analysis. A good day to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ernie Minton, the Dean of the College of Agriculture at Kansas State University, and the Principal and Senior Director of Teconomy Partners, Simon Tripp. Once again, that firm putting together this analysis of the impact of agricultural research out of Kansas State University on the agricultural sector. We'll be back with more. This is Agriculture Today. Welcome back. You're listening to Agriculture Today. As we've mentioned a time or two already this week, the annual Research and Extension Conference is underway at Kansas State University. And county and district extension agricultural agents from all around the state have assembled for the conference, as they usually do. So we take the opportunity to invite a few of them over and have them tell us what's going on in their locations around the state agriculturally of late and talk about some of the programs that they are initiating in their locations. Renee Tuttle is with us. She is with the West Plains Extension District, which is relatively new. It's comprised of Scott and Finney counties in west central Kansas. Renee, thanks for joining us, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
And let's talk briefly about the district itself. It's come together a few months ago, is that right?
It came together in July of 2020, and then they were able to hire 3 new agents. So I started as the agriculture agent, and then Anthony Reardon started as the horticulture, and Janet Hartness as the 4-H agent. So now we have a full team, and we've been going strong for a year.
Very good. Remind folks of the nature of agriculture in those 2 counties. It's very strong in crop production, obviously, and in the feedlot sector, too.
It is. Scott County, I believe, ranks second in total agriculture sales in the state of Kansas, specifically when you're looking at feed yards. And so there's a lot of agriculture in our region. And so it's exciting to be out there and working with those growers.
Well, let's take a quick look back at the year 2021. Crop production-wise, not done yet, of course, in the thick of harvest for grain sorghum for sure out there. What kind of year has it been for the 2 counties?
It's been an interesting year. So we started off the year with a lot of rain and a lot of humidity, 2 things that folks in western Kansas aren't used to. I'm originally from Virginia, so to me it was exciting to see it. It kind of felt like I was at home with that humidity, and it really helped those crops get off to a good start. And then the water turned off, and we didn't get rain for several weeks. Thankfully, it wasn't too terribly hot. We did have some hot days, but I think the crops did pretty well throughout the summer. And then we got some tail-end rains that really helped as well. So I think everyone's pretty happy with their yields. They're not off the charts by any means, but definitely we'll keep them in the business for next year. Breaking
it down a bit, it was a tough go for wheat production in your neck of the woods, wasn't it? For dry land,
it was.
That is.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't the worst year that I've seen, but it was definitely a tough year.
But the row crops, with the rainfall timely as it was, have done pretty well, you said.
Pretty well. The dryland corn did much better than we expected. The irrigated did average or a little bit above average, and that grain sorghum looks amazing in the field. There's still a lot of it there. In Scott County, a lot of it has been harvested, and they're happy with their yields. Down in southern Finney County, just looking at it, it's just absolutely beautiful, and I can't wait till we get combines through it so we can find out what those yields look like.
Quite a bit of cutting to do.
Oh, yes. Right. There is plenty to do, especially in that southern half of Finney County.
Have you seen, Renee, interest in soybean production in that region growing to any degree?
I have definitely seen an increase in soybean acres with Enlist and Extend coming out. That's definitely given growers a few more options, and they don't have to worry about drift with 2,4-D or dicamba, depending on which trait they purchase. And they're still out in the field, so I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what those yields look like as well. Some look pretty decent, and some make me a little nervous, but it'll be interesting to get some of that data back to see how it's going.
Is much under pivot, or is it largely dry land?
I would say mostly of it is irrigated. I have seen a few acres of dryland beans here and there. I know several farmers tried it last year, didn't turn out so hot, so they didn't do it again this year. So, like I said, it's more of a Finney County thing. I don't see too terribly much in Scott County, although there are some. But it's been an interesting year. Definitely, I've seen a lot more sunflowers, and I've seen a lot more cotton, and that cotton is gradually making its way up to Scott County and further north. So that'll be interesting to see kind of what different crops we see in the future.
As you look at it, what's the inspiration behind the heightened interest in sunflowers and cotton then?
Well, I'd say markets for sure. And the sunflowers looked pretty good this year. A lot of them had stem borers, and there's some different issues that you're going to have to face when you're planting sunflowers. But from what I saw, they looked great. In the cotton, folks are just looking for an alternate crop that doesn't take so much water. But growing cotton is kind of like babysitting a toddler. You do have to spray it a lot more, and you do have to look after a lot more. And technically, it's a tree, and you kind of have to treat it different. So that's been kind of eye-opening for a lot of growers in the area.
What's on the minds of your producers right now?
Input prices. You know, the crop prices aren't too terrible, but those input prices are just getting higher and higher and higher. Fertilizer has gone through the roof. You know, we all know about the export ban and different things of that nature. And I feel like daily we get a different price sheet and we see different projections. It's hard to get excited about next year, but it definitely proves that you've got a budget and you've got a plan for next year, and farmers have to look at prepaying and definitely getting with their retailer and planning ahead.
It's a serious situation,
it is.
But you think that your producers are already crafting ways of navigating this?
I hope so. I know that I've talked about it till I was blue in the face, just trying to get folks to be prepared, you know, because you have your different alternatives. You have anhydrous, you have your dry, you have your liquid. And at the beginning, anhydrous was a little bit less expensive, so folks were kind of tinkering around with the idea of using anhydrous, and it's valuable, but there are different precautions and safety concerns and equipment that you need, but that shouldn't hinder you away from using it. And then it's just tough because the market changes and shifts so much that, yeah, you may decide to go one route and the next day this price goes up, and so you kind of have to switch things. But the most important thing is you can't grow crops without nitrogen. So you have to plan ahead for that. And technically you can't grow crops without P and K. So you need to plan ahead for that too. And so I just don't want folks to leave it out just because it's expensive. I want folks to plan ahead.
Lastly, on that point, do you think that soybeans may have even greater appeal for some producers?
It may when you're looking at fertilizer needs. Hopefully, folks have been soil sampling their fields year after year and building that bank and preparing for a year like this. But I know not everyone does that. And so it's really important to take those soil samples this fall before that ground gets too hard and know exactly how much fertilizer you need to grow the crop that you plan to plant for next year.
While we have you here, Renee, we would like to talk about what extension activities and initiatives you have going for your agricultural producers in Finney and Scott counties.
Absolutely. We look forward to hosting a risk management workshop, and that'll be in January and February. You know, I keep talking about planning ahead and budgeting. Well, it's going to cover enterprise budgets, crop marketing, the Farm Bill program, crop insurance, and a fifth session on livestock. And I know that they've had this program in the past, and it kind of focused more on finances and whatnot. And this is going to focus on those budgets. Those budgets are so important, looking at every line item, making sure you're not missing anything, everything from irrigation equipment to your herbicides to insecticides, just planning ahead. And so I'm really looking forward to having folks in for that.
Now, is that part of the Women in Agriculture series?
Is, yes. It is put on by Miss Robin Reed and Miss Lavelle Windsor, and I look forward to working with them. And we're working together with Kearney and Wichita County to put that on in Garden City at the fairgrounds.
And you say, Renee, you have something that the district is exploring right now and cobbling together that would be supportive for the youth in your area.
We do. As a new district, we're looking for ways to get folks involved. It's been a long time since we've had that true connection to the community, and we really think that connection's done through our program development committees that come in and are kind of appointed officials to help us kind of wade through what the community needs and how we connect with them. And we've decided to add a youth ambassador program to our program development committee. It is an unofficial position, but it is a good leadership and citizenship activity for youth in the area. They can come in. They don't necessarily have to be part of 4-H. They can be part of a farm or enjoy agriculture or want to promote it. So specifically in my area, I'm focused on agriculture and natural resources. So I look forward to having youth in the area apply to be part of this and be part of our committee and kind of come up with good programming activities for the next year.
And the outcome of that to broaden the understanding of agriculture for the next generation, is that?
Certainly. And then facilitate those youth into growing into good, supporters of Extension as they become adults. And hopefully they stay in the area, and that leads to community vitality and continuing on the tradition of agriculture in western Kansas.
Well, good luck with that undertaking. Hope that comes together well and is successful. It sounds like it's off to a good foundation anyway. And before we let you go, the year in agriculture just about in the books now. The general outlook for 2022, markets are good, inputs are way too high.
Yep.
So what's the mood out there amongst your producers?
The mood is uncertain because there's a lot of uncertain information coming out in terms of what availability there's going to be, what seed availability there's going to be. And so, really folks need to keep their ears to the grindstone and listen and make sure that they're keeping up to date, whether it's from Extension or other resources, so that we can make sure that everybody's profitable and successful in 2022.
Well, farmers by nature are nimble by necessity.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tested this year.
For sure.
Good to have you in, Renee, and enjoy the rest of the conference here on campus. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
She's the Agriculture and Natural Resources Agent for the West Plains Extension District in west central Kansas. That would be Finney and Scott counties. Renee Tuttle with us, and tomorrow we'll have more Extension agricultural agents from elsewhere in the state. Mike Side with us here on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
My friend talked about the Louisiana Purchase.
That's Gus van Der Hoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
I talked with a dear friend about the Louisiana Purchase, and he pointed out a few things I did not know. Of course, you would know all about it as you studied United States history in high school and maybe later in college. If the latter is the case, you chewed through all or nearly all 900-plus pages of that at one time required book, The United States, The History of a Republic by Hofstadter, Miller, and Aaron. I picked it up at a college book sale. Not too smart of the student to sell it, but then again, maybe he or she hated the required course and bought a pitcher of beer in Aggieville. But I still think it was not a smart move to sell a good reference book. It is the reason I picked it up and have used it to look up historic facts about our country, which I did not know. So, when my friend talked about the Louisiana Purchase by Jefferson in 1803, I started to read up on that part of our history. Looking at the area which entailed the Louisiana Purchase, it's interesting to note that it was not the western lands as we see them today, but they were the western lands in Jefferson's day. Lewis and Clark and their companions went beyond, and they did see the far west when they saw the Pacific. The Louisiana Purchase did double the then-known territory of the United States, extending its territory to the Rocky Mountains and the northern border to Canada. Important in the purchase was the relatively narrow neck along the Mississippi River to the port city of New Orleans, the connection to the Gulf of Mexico. From the port, the world stood open, as it did from the eastern harbors. The purchase today counts part or the whole of 14 states, including our state, Kansas. Kansas is not the middle, but the northern part is getting close to the center. And that brings me to an interesting point. Of course, you know the price which was paid for the land bought, 828,000 square miles. It was the sum of $15 million. That was in 1803. It was a lot of money. Napoleon used it to pay and build his armies, and then he lost it all. Now remember, I placed the northern part of Kansas near the center, and that puts our farm also close to the center, all 430 acres of then wild and open land. The purchase price of the 828,000 square miles of land, including our land, at $15 million, made the cost of our farmland at approximately 3 cents an acre, just $12.90. But that's not all. Who do you think financed this deal? The $15 million was for the most part financed by Banks of Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Just think of it. Our land, at one time in 1803, was bought and briefly owned by Banks of Amsterdam, all 430 acres, for $12.90.
Gus van Der Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. Our time's away once more. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.